Sandy Tuckerman was born in the home and was adopted by a New Jersey couple. Her American mother was also not eligible to adopt in the States, so she turned to Canada.
She had gone to an attorney who had advertised in a Newark paper about this baby farm. This I found out later. And she called him, and then I think she paid, I'm trying to remember, from what I understand, it was like about $10,000, which seemed like a lot, she thought, 40 years ago.
Word spread in New Jersey. There were babies available for a price in Nova Scotia.
I always thought she had friends that all had adopted children, and we'd get together once a year. And I thought they were all her friends from Newark, but they were people she met that were in this group that adopted from the home in Eastchester.
The folks in Eastchester didn't seem to mind the area's growing reputation as the baby-selling capital of the Eastern Seaboard. But there was at least one skeptic. In 1938, F.R. McKinnon started his career in the health ministry with responsibility for adoptions. McKinnon was appalled by what was going on at the home and appalled by society's indifference.
My own feeling about public opinion at that particular time was that the man on the street, the man and woman out on the street, were supportive of the kind of thing that the Ideal Maternity Home were doing. They looked at this, they said, here are these girls, they have a problem, they have to find somebody to help them in this particular situation. The Ideal Maternity Home are doing it. The government are not doing it. At least they're not doing it satisfactorily. The Ideal Maternity Home is. What's wrong with that? You know.
A visit to the home confirmed his worst suspicions.
I recall on one particular occasion I was there, and Dr. Young, I don't know what brought the subject up or how it came about, but the discussion centered around one of these placements, and Dr. Young quite openly said to me, I raised the issue of twins, whether or not they had any twins born there, and whether or not there were any placement of twins. And no, he said, not too many, but he said, I had a couple from the United States last week who were here looking for twins, and he said, I matched them up a pair.
He made twins.
I matched them up a pair, yes, he made them.
A careful study is made of the parents, their disposition, characteristics and accomplishments in life, whether professional or domestic, complexion and general build, in order to convey to you a good idea of the type of child you are adopting.
Well, babies at the Ideal Maternity Home were, the harsh reality was they were a commodity. The healthy, white, perfect babies were sold for as high a price as possible. The so-called rejects really were any babies who were deformed or birthmarked. And these are the Young's own words. These were their words used in their contracts with the mothers. If the baby was crippled or deformed in any way, then it would not qualify for the adoption program.
Jimmy Proctor, born Harry Robichaud, didn't qualify for an expensive adoption. At $800, he was a bargain for R.C. Proctor, a retired Army sergeant. Jimmy says now he wishes the Youngs had checked into his father's background, because R.C. Proctor was a violent man who viciously beat his adopted son.
Obviously, he's such an abusive person. Why would he take you from the home in the first place?
Well, I don't know. He never ever told me that. He never adopted me. He never told me that he ever loved me. He never told me anything that made me feel like he wanted me. He wanted to use me. He wanted to use me as a slave, as a worker, to get done what he couldn't do or what he wasn't around to do.
What condition were you in when you left the Ideal Maternity Home?
He told me that I was suffering from malnutrition, that my stomach was all puffed up.
He said he rescued you from the maternity home, didn't he?
Yes, he made it look like, I should be ever so grateful because he rescued me. But the type of life he put me through, I often wondered whether it was worth being rescued.
What were you rescued from?
From death, because eventually I would have died there and I would have ended up in a Butterbox in the backyard like the rest of them that died there. See, I've heard many stories from my stepdad about that place.
Well, this whole area directly behind the Seventh-day Adventist Cemetery is actually where at least 100 or 125 babies were buried.
There's nothing here but brush.
No, it's very sad. The elderly man who actually buried some of the babies brought me through here one day, and it was really frustrating for him because he kept fighting his way through the brush, and he kept saying, I mean, we knew there were never headstones, but he kept saying that at least there should be, you know, little mounds of rocks or something to mark off the areas. He had remembered doing that. But I think what really upset him was when he realized that possibly this whole area had been bulldozed.
This was the fate of the so-called rejects. Babies often ended up in butterboxes, according to Bette Cahill's research.
The allegations of infanticide come from people who are elderly, who may have clouded memories. How can we be sure that that's actually what happened there?
How can we be sure that babies were left to die? The only way we can, well, I mean, the former employees of the home, the women who went there, relatives of the Youngs, they all have very different stories that all add up to the same thing. The babies were left to die using one method or another. In one case, a woman told me of how she had taken a baby from the home and it died within 3 days. And when she had a doctor examine the infant just before the death, the doctor said, this child will never live. It's so malnourished. There wasn't a hope. In another case, there was a woman who told me about how Lila Young had instructed the kitchen staff to feed the babies molasses and water, nothing more. And a baby on a diet of molasses and water will last maybe 2 weeks. In another case, a woman went to the basement of the home, opened the furnace door and found the partially burned corpse of an infant. And yet another woman tells of how her husband was paid, he was a fisherman, was paid to dispose of bodies at sea. So the methods used and what was really happening there was really quite unbelievable.
For the babies who survived, the legacy of the ideal maternity home endures.
Every weekday on What on Earth, a lot goes on.
What on earth is it all about? As the world gets smaller, there ain't no doubt. There's so much information, that's no exaggeration. What on earth makes the world go around?
I think you'll find a lot going on for you. Weekday mornings on What on Earth. Join me.
Tonight, while you sleep, the world will change. Tomorrow morning, when you wake up, watch the CBC Morning News. For up-to-the-minute coverage of world events, business, current affairs, and sports. The complete package, first thing in the morning. The CBC Morning News. Because a lot can happen overnight.
After a golden performance at the Olympics, Canada's teams are off to Denver, Colorado for the Short Track Speed Skating Championships. And in Paris, the World Individual Gymnastics Championships on CBC Sports Weekend, Saturday.
People in the area probably were unaware babies were neglected and dying in the home. At least it was never mentioned, and the Youngs seemed model citizens.
She provided employment. She was generous. She threw money around. They bought huge orders of groceries from the local business people. They were highly respected, very religious on the surface. Beyond that, I don't know. No one was really going to challenge them without any really good evidence. But it's interesting that the people who probably had the inside information, who really knew that babies were being neglected and left to die, those were probably women who had gone to the home in the first place to have a child. And they were there maybe working off their bills in the time after that. They were very much afraid to talk to anyone in authority about anything that went on in the home, because then they would have to expose themselves and what they had gone through.
The Youngs exploited people's weaknesses and prospered. By the 40s, the home was expanding and taking up to 120 women at a time. In the end, it was a journalist who was the Youngs' undoing. Paris-based novelist Mavis Gallant started her career as a reporter for the Montreal Standard. Acting on a tip, Gallant revealed the home's ruthless adoption business.
It's interesting because she never did uncover neglect of the children, the babies. She never touched on the criminal activity or even the selling of the babies. But what she did was she described this home. She did an expose that sort of laid out the unfortunate circumstances that young women found them in, and how they were coerced into giving up their babies, and how after they gave them up they regretted it.
The Young sued Mavis Gallant and her employer. It was big news. Gallant still has bitter memories of the trial and the troublesome Youngs.
It seemed to me obvious they were going to lose the case. But if they had won through some unimaginable series of events, what really bothered me was that I was being blamed, you see, as if I had invented something that I hadn't invented at all. This goes back to a time that was very hard for women. You see, it was hard for these poor kids who were going there to get rid of their shame, and it was hard for the woman writing the story just because I was a woman.
That was really the beginning of the end for William and Lily, because both sides brought in high-powered lawyers. It was probably, they called it a cause célèbre. It was one of the most sensational trials ever held in Nova Scotia. And they couldn't find enough seats for the media and spectators who just wanted to get into court to witness the spectacle, really.
F.R. McKinnon was in the courtroom hoping for the demise of his nemesis.
And of course the Chronicle, the Halifax Chronicle, carried a headline the following morning, one of the most beautiful headlines in terms of a headline calculated to arouse negative public opinion, carried the headline, "Babies Buried in Butterboxes." Can you imagine what that would do?
And public opinion.
And public opinion turned against them, switched and turned against them.
The Youngs were forced out of the baby business. The trial was expensive and they were broke. Lila and William both died in the 60s. Lila's buried here in Fox Point, just meters from the Butterboxes. Now that Lila, many of her friends and neighbors have passed on, so has vital information. Secrecy was the hallmark of the ideal maternity home, but for those who were born there, it's been a curse. They've spent years and years searching for their natural mothers and fathers. Jimmy Proctor doesn't know where to start. There are no clues left for him to follow.
I tell this story because there may be a mother and a father wandering around in Canada somewhere, maybe a mother who doesn't know she had a baby. And I mean, she understands she had the baby, but she may have been told by the people there that that baby had a fit last night and died. And she may be walking around 65 or 70 years old today and thought, yes, I had a baby, but it died. But it didn't die. Yeah, my mother. Whoever she is, I don't know her.
Sandy Tuckerman loves her New Jersey parents, but she knew she was adopted from Canada. Sandy says she always felt out of place.
I would go through the photo albums looking like, maybe I look a little bit like this person. And it was like I didn't feel like I belonged at times. You know, I felt that there's somebody else out there that I belonged to. And I didn't feel that they were wonderful parents, but it just felt like I was missing something.
Sandy tracked down her mother and was rebuffed. However, her mother told Sandy how to find her dad. Sandy's letter to her father ended up at her Aunt Maisie Hudson's, while her dad was off on his fishing boat. Maisie, who looks after her bachelor brother, couldn't resist.
So I opened it, and it said, "Dear Dad, I am your daughter, Sandy." I closed it up, in shock. And so I went to bed at night at 12 o'clock. My husband says, "Well, get up and read what the story is on it." So I did. I got up and read. She said, "I'm your daughter. I have 3 children. I have a wonderful husband, and I want to meet you. Whether you want me to or not, I'm coming to see you." So My oldest daughter was here from BC and over visiting my second daughter, so we took the letter and went to his boat.
Yeah, I didn't know what to think there.
Must have come as an awful shock.
Well, it was in a way. It's hard to know what to say, but
But it turned out pretty well, didn't it?
yeah, to get a family that quick, you know, to know you had a family that quick. 2 or 3 granddaughters, and growed up. Now they're in college, I guess, or a couple of them.
Did you feel cheated at all, that you hadn't known her for longer?
Oh, well, I imagine, yes. Yeah, that would happen.
He's great. He's just, my dad's really great. You know, just so nice to be with him when we're up there. My aunt is great. They're all wonderful.
But Sandy wants one final gesture. There's a craving to come to terms with her legacy. She and Michael Ryder, another ideal baby, want attention paid to the lives that were lost.
If we could do something, get everybody together, even at the place, and have a memorial for these babies, it would be a great thing to do. Michael and I said we'll even do it together if we can kind of get up there. And if we find other people that are from this home, maybe there is something we could do, just a little memorial for these babies.
I don't care how many of the principals are dead. I don't care about criminal investigations. That's not important. I think what is important that we admit that something happened there, and that in some way those people that died there are remembered. It's not asking much, something simple. But to have babies buried in butterboxes, in vacant lots and open fields, there's something very obscene about that.
On the south shore of Nova Scotia, I'm Lynn Whittam for the Journal.
Bette Cahill's book, Butterbox Babies, was released this week. Tomorrow night, the Journal will be on after the hockey game. That means a slight delay in Ontario and East. In Manitoba and West, we should be on at a regular time. That's our program for tonight. I'm Brian Stewart. Good night.